Hi, everybody. James here, the growth executive back. I just had a technical issue, had to disconnect, but we are going to start our live makes it over. So if you have any questions, feel free to post in the comments below. This is how to build a simple marketing plan. I'm just going to take a few minutes and walk you through a process called the business model canvas. It's an incredible resource and tool. There's a couple of them at your disposal. This particular use of the tool is around marketing. So if you're looking for a way to build a one-page marketing plan that you'll actually use and can take off the shelf and put into play, this is the right place to be. So let me just confirm here. I got a couple of comments, make sure everybody is good to go. We will get on our way here in the next 30 seconds or so. All right, everybody hear me okay? I think we're good. Here, good. All right, awesome. Looks like we're playing. And for some reason, it's still outside the room that I posted, or the previous live event that I made. So I don't know if I just didn't set it up right, but looks like everybody's here. So I'm going to just proceed. Okay, good. Yes, I did get your question. I will cover that for sure. Thank you for that. I'm just going to make sure everybody has this link. I've got one person confused, so I'm going to post it right here so everybody has it. Okay, good. All right, so we are live. Thank you, everybody, for that. All right, so again, when it comes to marketing plans, I'm going to show you an example of a marketing plan I built years ago for a client that was selling into a leisure market, and they had, I don't know, 30 or so team members on that we were working with to kind of bring all those ideas, everything out of a binder into one place. Okay, so the challenge that they had as a leadership team is that there was a lot of like siloed departments. And I don't know if you've experienced this before, and it doesn't really matter how big or small your team is, this is inevitable. So you have 2 or 3 marketing folks at a startup or in an established company, or you might be a startup where you only have like 4 people in the entire company, but there's not really a way to clearly communicate like what's everybody working on, and to tie it all together to the broader, bigger vision of the company, what would be called like the business model or the vision or mission of the company. So some of the tools that I've worked with over the years, and again, I've worked with startups that are a couple of team members, scrapping by at $1 million in revenue, all the way up to teams doing 200-300 million in revenue that are quite established. Okay. What I have found is without a kind of high level document, like what's called the business model process, and this is just a big thing that we put up on the wall and we work through with the leadership team, without like a high level orientation of the company, like what is our mission and our purpose and our vision, why do we exist, who do we serve, without that information like in one place, it can get lost in all these like buried strategy documents, right? So if you feel like right now you could walk into any member of your team, no matter how big or small your organization is, and say, hey, why do we exist and who do we exist for, I might be surprised what answers you get, right? Without defining that up front, you're going to have team members that are really all over the place with that answer, right? So as a leader, our job is to create that forward momentum in the company or in the organization, to be a nonprofit, whatever. Our job is to make sure that everybody is rowing in the same direction and that we have that clarity. Okay. Now, obviously, a nonprofit would say potentially, oh, we exist to help, feed the hungry, or we might exist to do X, Y, or Z. And that's a true statement. But the question is, okay, then how does that happen? How do we actually communicate that abroad? Because we're probably not the only organization in the world that does that. So what is our unique proposition or our unique value as an organization? Why us? Why would somebody choose to work with us to do this thing, right? So there's a good chance that whatever you're doing is not that special in the sense that you're not the only one in the world doing it. At least if you are, that's incredible. But I've yet to meet anybody who's doing anything worthwhile that's doing it for the first time. So chances are there's others out there. Our job is to make it clear to our team and then ultimately our market and in our messaging why we exist and how we who we serve and for what to what end and for what purpose. So that's what we're going to cover today in the business model canvas. Now, what I've done again is I've taken this big idea of building the business model and I've broken it down to just the chunk of marketing. Okay. So as an organization, we exist for a purpose and a reason. And the more we can articulate that and communicate that in our marketing messaging, like why we exist and for whom we exist, and the more that can translate its way into the market, the more relevant we'll become and the more helpful we'll be working with the right people. I've made a lot of mistakes over the years of being too broad, too generic, and not really defining that uniqueness up front. And what will often happen is you just end up serving everybody, and then you don't really define who you're best suited for. And that can be a real challenge later when you're trying to do business development or sales when you move beyond the founder. The founder might be good at thinking on their feet and kind of making stuff up based on who they're talking to. But once you move beyond founder-led sales or founder-led marketing, and you try to create more of a system that someone else can come along and implement, like an employee or a coordinator or something like that, you try to bring on someone else or even a vendor, it's really hard for them to like, okay, what are we doing here, right? So that's why when you engage with a marketing professional, whether you hire someone internally or you work with an agency or somebody externally, the very first thing they're going to try to do is take all this theoretical, like out there ideas and get it on paper, get it in one place so that everybody has that clarity. Because the goal here in leadership is to create clarity. And without a common language and without a clear process, we don't have clarity. And I appreciate the questions, so keep them coming. I will be sure to get to those in a second. All right, so back real quick to the model. I'm going to share my screen, make sure everybody can see it. If you could give me a thumbs up, I would really appreciate it. So here it comes right about, I'm going to be on screen number 1. So I'm going to have to move this out of the way over here. Oh, that's not what I want to do. That's terrible. It's going to give everybody a headache. Okay, perfect. So everybody should be able to see my my business model canvas up here. And again, this is built on a popular framework of pulling back and looking at, literally, I've got, like I said, a 4 by, I don't know, it's like 4 by 6, 4 by 8 sheet of this that I put up on a client's wall. I've got it in Canvas formats where we can write on it. I've got paper versions where we can pencil it out. But this is a big canvas that we literally leave up. And what I have found when I work with organizations is we just leave it up in the conference room for, months, because it's just hopefully go back and see that. Now, what I like to do is I like to take that big thing off the wall and implement it or put it into a product called Notion. If you're not familiar with Notion, it's basically a way to create very simple notes and build on those notes and to share them internally or even externally. Like if you, I'll send you a link to this one here, where we can actually collaborate together. So I can continue to add content or define terms, add more images or graphs, things like that. And then as I'm updating it in my Notion file, everybody's getting the benefit of being able to see that. Even turn on email notifications to be notified when there's changes, okay? So a common challenge is we build a marketing strategy. We really think through that. We bring in maybe a consultant or internally we do it, but then it just sits in a binder on a shelf and nobody actually implements it, right? So the idea is, how do we take a big idea off the shelf, put it, or off the wall even on a canvas like this, and how do I create it down into small chunks and bite-sized pieces that the team can understand and make it easy for people to drill in or click or double click into areas of it and get to that information very quickly and just have it kind of more simplified. All right. So starting out with the canvas here, you'll see the first piece of it. These are squares that you can click in, and I'll click in just a couple of them here and walk you through the big areas of each one. Okay. But the first thing we want to really do is think about, like, okay, what is our value proposition? Why do we exist as an organization? What's our leading reason for being, right? And I'll come back to this in a minute as I drill into it. But that would be like, what is my unique value proposition? So when I click into this document allows me to kind of answer some basic questions. All right. Like, why do we exist as a company? Who is our main competition? Some of the customer pieces. So we'll break out the plan in these pieces. But as we answer these questions, it'll auto-complete these other squares for us and help us understand, okay, part of our value proposition is knowing what our value is, but only certain people care about that, right? So we may exist as an organization to create value for X, Y, or Z, but who is those X and how do we reach them, right? So that'll be like the segmentation of the customers. Now that I know our value proposition, like, who am I serving with that value? Who do I create that value for? Because every organization exists to create value. How much value you create and for whom is what we're asking here, right? If you solve a big problem for a lot of people or solve a big problem for a few people, you're a very specialized kind of niche organization. You're making maybe a lot of money per customer. So your billings will look different. Your sales process will look different. As I mentioned before, as a software company, I've served customers where, selling into government, for example, there were $4 million contracts, long RFP, request for pricing, long drawn out process, 2 or 3 customers a year was about all we'd expect to sign, but that would generate 12, 18, 20,000 or $20 million in billings. And then the ongoing maintenance of that, of course, would stack. So that organization selling $1 million software contracts is going to look significantly different than if you're solving maybe a smaller problem for a lot of people, right? In another company I was involved with, we were selling fitness, coaching, learning. Like, when you sign up for a module, you would get, maybe for $50, you would get this module. For $150, you get this module. And then you could join a coaching group and then ultimately pay a subscription. So if you're selling $50 fitness product, right, that's a subscription or a membership to a community, like maybe a gym or an online community, that's going to look significantly different in your marketing plan than if you're solving, of course, the $4 million software company problem, right? So again, the more clarity we have and the value that we create and for whom allows us then to kind of build out from there what's going to be the most effective channel. And by channel, we mean like, where do I go get people? Like, do I get people off of pay per click? Am I doing Google bidding, for example, to get folks, or am I picking up the phone and working to take someone onto the golf game, right? I can assure you the government sales software company wasn't doing a lot of Google bidding because people weren't Googling like this software. Like that, that would have been a complete waste of money. That wasn't where we spent our time. What we did is we bought a Cessna plane and a pilot, and then flew to counties and took leaders out to dinner and lunch and did everything we could to not cross the line as being illegal in that, but just getting out and getting our name in front of people and then doing consultation to find out what are people learning, where can we grow, what's the challenges. But we literally subscribed to a software tool that told us who was up for RFP and what we need to do. So that sales process and that marketing looks significantly different in that organization than, of course, trying to find people who are Googling back pain or whatever. Okay. So when you think about the channel that you're going after, a lot of folks want to start with the tactic. They think, hey, we want to do text messaging, or we want to do email, we want to do paid ads, we want to do LinkedIn, we want to do Facebook. A lot of folks come to a marketing agency or to a marketing strategist or even a marketer will start, and they sometimes will want to jump to the tactics. Okay. They want to just do the thing like email or text messaging or pay per click, but they want to jump into that. And the challenge with leading with tactics is if you don't back up to the strategy and get clarity on like, what are we trying to accomplish here? Then you can just chase a bunch of tactical things and you're not really clear on what the strategy even is, right? So tactics are informed by strategy, and strategy is informed by the goals, the mission, the purpose, like the bigger reason for being. Okay. So a properly designed canvas is going to start with like, what is our value and why do we exist? For whom do we serve? And from there, how are we going to reach them? Okay. So explain in kind of a different, I hope a helpful way. And I'm going to just switch over here to another presentation I put together that breaks this down for you. I'm going to jump over here. Just make sure you guys can see that screen. So here's the canvas I just showed you. And I'm going to, again, if you're on this call or if you comment, just let me know and I will send you a link to this actual Notion file and you can duplicate it and then create it for your own organization. Happy to jump on the phone and walk you through some examples of that. Obviously, do coaching around this with my clients and actually help them implement this because it takes more than just 1 or 2 meetings to get this right. So we can work the process together. But basically, I will share this resource with you and then you can build it out. Okay, so the 3C framework, I like to break this down into something that's very simple to understand. And I mentioned this before, as a company, our first step is what is our mission and our vision? The chances are this is already defined somehow, some way. Typically the founder or the leadership, the founder team has already established this, okay? Now, a lot of us will think of a mission statement like, well, it's up on the wall and that's our vision statement or our mission. And that's helpful, but that's not really what we're talking about. That's not really all that actionable. When we talk about marketing mission and reason for being, what we're thinking about is what hill are we going to take and what resources and what do we need to do to take that hill? That's the mission we're talking about. All right. So this isn't a theoretical like, oh, well, we exist to save the world. If that's helpful. That's great. How are we going to do it? And from whom do we do it for? And then how do we communicate that effectively to get other people to join us in doing it with us? Okay. So the company is the first C. The second is chances are other folks are doing this. So if we're going to do it too, what makes us unique in our offering of it? Right? A lot of companies get this or organizations get this wrong up front because they're not clear on their competition. Now, to be clear, I don't personally care much about competition. I don't read the competition press and compare myself to like, oh, I wonder if we're better or what. Like, I don't really care. I will pick up the phone and call a competitor and say, hey, let's go have dinner and just get to know them. Because here's what my view of competition. There's enough to go around. Like in one of my startups, we're serving like nonprofits, for example. There's 2 million startup or nonprofits. So there is plenty of room for a lot of companies to provide text messaging to nonprofits. In fact, I think nonprofits are better served if more than one company is doing it, right? It would be a shame to have just one massive company doing it because that doesn't make us better. It doesn't allow the customers to have choices and it doesn't stretch us to all be thinking about ways to improve on what we're doing together, right? So for me, competition isn't a problem. It's an opportunity to define why we exist and for whom, and to sharpen our skills as to why we're unique and what makes us special, right? Why would someone choose to work with us? And frankly, I had just this last week, I had a prospective customer I was talking to, and it became clear after a season or a couple of conversations that we were not the best fit. And I'm like, well, why don't you try this company out and just refer them to a competition or competitor, right? Because my concern is that the customer be taken care of. And if I don't feel like we're the best option because of our unique value proposition is different than what they're looking for, what they need, then they really should talk to this other company because of their value proposition is unique to them. So every company or organization, nonprofits, for-profits, startups, established enterprise software companies, doesn't matter, have a reason for being. Your ability to pull that off the shelf, define it, clarify it, and add value to a set of folks and be clear about that will be your ability to communicate that effectively in marketing, right? This used to make more sense when I shaved. But I would say really my only competitor is that I worry about is the guy that I shave, because that's the only guy that I can take down, that can take me down, is my mindset and the way I show up, right? The fact that I don't clarify for whom I serve and for what end and what value I create, that's more costly to my company than some other company creating some product that competes with mine, frankly. Okay. So my clarity and my confidence and my ability and who I am as an individual, as a founder, what my team can do as a group, and what our process and product can do overall, and for whom we do it for best, the more I can clarify that and take that to market and communicate that clearly, that's really where I should be spending my energy and my time and my focus. Not comparing like, am I $2 cheaper or whatever, right? Okay. So a great way to make yourself miserable in marketing is just to constantly read your competitor press. Now, I've been in a unique situation personally where we've later been acquired by a private equity group, a group that buys up companies like ours, and we ended up rolling up into 20 companies just like ours. And what was interesting about that is I later learned, just because now we were on the same team, I later learned their own insecurities, their own failures, their own problems, their own challenges, and realized that we were actually all struggling with the same thing. And I just thought they were way further along, right? So you begin to believe your own competitors' press, and that gets in your head, and then you just wind up like, why, that just it's just not helpful. So I think I've beat a dead horse here, but that's near and dear to my head, or my heart. So beyond the company and beyond the competition is the customer, right? Now, depending on your clarity of who your customer is, and by customer, by the way, for a nonprofit, this could be the clients or the folks that benefit from your program or services, right? So when we're having a marketing strategy conversation, I want to make it clear that this conversation is about how we reach more folks that benefit from our programs and services, right? I work with several YMCAs, and sometimes we have conversations about members, and we talk about reaching more members. How do we convert folks that come into the lobby that are interested in signing up for the YMCA membership? How do I convert them? That's my customer, right? Other times, what we change out, and we're very clear when we make the transition, but we're not talking about members. We're talking about people who might also be members, but they're really more donors. And sometimes donors are members and sometimes they're not. All right. So if I'm talking about donor development, that's going to be different because that's now the person that I'm talking to. Right? And my marketing, my messaging needs to be specific to that. So beyond the members is the donors in that context, but there's also potentially volunteers. And then there's a community at large, right? And then there's corporate sponsors. And so as you think about customer, that's the individual or group of individuals that are identifiable, that benefit from something that we're doing, and that we want to reach out to effectively and communicate with and explain what we do and for whom we do it for, and what makes us unique in doing that. All right. So breaking this down again a little bit more is our mission and vision. I'll share the slides with you, so we won't spend a lot of time on these slides, but just our mission and vision. Again, what hill are we taking, and how do we take it, into what end? Okay. Great passage that says, "Of people without a vision will perish." And basically what that just means is, if we don't have a reason for being, if we don't have a reason for existing as an organization, if I don't have any reason for existing if I don't have a purpose for belonging to that as an employee or as a member of the staff, then over time I'm going to be kind of trying to find something else. Like, there's just not that real alignment. So we're looking for vision, mission alignment internally. And then the more we can create that eternal strength and communicate that externally, the more we can draw people to us. Because really, without that clarity, it becomes really hard to draw people to you, right? A lot of folks are good at tactical, practical stuff, but without a vision, nobody has a reason to care, right? All right. So vision and mission is very important. Core strengths: what do we do as an organization? What are we best at the world at? And then how do we productize or systematize that? It doesn't have to be a product. It could just be the way we do it. It's our secret sauce, the way we take that solution and solve that particular problem for who we're solving it for. But how do we take that and make that clear and communicate that? And then, of course, if you're doing it well, there should be plenty of wins. So, always be suspicious of someone who says, "Hey, here's someone you can talk to," that actually getting the results, right? In nonprofits, this looks a lot like testimonials and case studies and impact reports, where we're talking about the things that we're solving, the challenges that we're solving. Here's a story. So it's a lot of story. And as we tell story, we're basically communicating, look, here's a defined problem. Here's an organization that can solve for it. Here's how we do it. Here's the evidence. Okay. Now, I mentioned competition before, but typically what I look for is the top 2 or 3 competitors. There's probably more than that, but I just only concerned with the top 2 or 3, particularly around the channels and the customers that I'm focused on. And then what is our positioning against that? Are we going head to head? Are we going to be bidding on the same projects? Or are we going to be looking for opportunities maybe just above or just below their place in the market? Because there's plenty of room for many of us, right? But I don't want to just be another me too. So what can I do to create value specific to the customers that I serve, specific, and then value, and then position that against others, and that's called market positioning. Okay, so quick exercise. It's not as hard as some people think. You can actually get there fairly quickly. All right, now this is where I would spend most. So beyond the mission and vision, once we get that down, this is where I see organizations really get it sideways. And truth be told, this is usually as a founder where I trip personally. Okay, I have a tendency to want to help everybody, right? So when you're first starting out, either with the nonprofits that we've worked with or the for-profit, the startup companies, software companies, I just like, if you'll take my call, I will talk to you about your problem, and I like you, so I'm going to help you, right? And that's helpful, except for if I can't help them the best, then I'm really wasting their time, and I'm not doing the best I can because I'm not helping the right people. There's some organizations that I know I can help, and some organizations where I just can't as much, right? I can help them a little bit, but I'm not going to help them a lot. So the best use of my time is to find the people that I can help the most, and I need to define that up front. Now, a good way to find out what this looks like, if you want a quick hack to figure this out, is just to look at past results, particularly as a software company. Like, what are your customers that stay the longest, to get the most value? What that could look like: billings, right? How much revenue you generated per customer type, or it could just simply be product utilization, who actually uses the thing and gets the value out of it. But there's going to be some evidence that you're leaving behind you as to who these people are and how you're best serving them. And if you can go find those little evidence trails and kind of follow those through, I've got a process to do that with my nonprofits and startups that I work with. But the more you can define kind of what those breadcrumbs look like, the more clarity you have to kind of, this is what it might look like moving forward, right? There's always evidence of who these people are that you're able to help. And then just pick up the phone, be very clear. Every time I start a software company, my only goal is to get 100 people to use the silly thing that I'm building and validate that I'm solving the right thing. Out of those hundreds are going to come 25 or 30 that are the best fit. And it's going to, at some point, that'll become clear. The knowing comes in the doing. I'll figure that out. As I get that clarity, then I double down and get to 1,000 of the ideal fit people, right? So I'm not like all things, all people. I'm looking for that specific fit. All right. So as you get that clarity and articulate that, you're really building that out. Now, we've went from the 3, and just as a reminder, the 3C framework is company, competition, and customer. The next framework, which is very simple, is just simply, now I'm moving from this big theory of market to how am I actually going to take it to market with my messaging, right? So that just looks like, how am I going to segment those people? Not everybody's, the same. So how do I segment my customers out to identify the most ideal customer? And then how do I choose to reach those people with my unique proposition? That's SMTP. And I won't spend a lot of time on here, but I'll just give you some examples that I have found in breaking down our market segmentation. We look at, like, as Rallycore, my software company serving nonprofits, we look at, we'll pull a 990, for example, and we'll just simply look at, like, operating income. Like, I don't care about top line income as much, because that could be a lot of grant money. I'm looking at how much money is consumer facing, like donor development, grassroots, face to face. Like, how many times does conversations matter to you? Like, you can be a really good grant writer, but we can see what happens to the grants, right? I'm not really interested in top line grant stuff. I'm interested in the individuals that have conversations with real people that are looking for better ways to engage those people, right? That's the people I can help. And then it's just, do you do it 2 times a month, or do you do it 200 times a month, right? So it's just a scale at that point. All right. So targeting is choosing the right customer. Messaging is about getting the right message that resonates with them, not a complicated process if you have a defined framework. All right. So business model canvas, again, as a high level, is a document that exists as a one-page plan that can easily be put up on a big screen in a conference room, or even printed on in literally a canvas that you can write on and erase with a eraser marker. And you're basically going in and you're asking very specific questions in each category. What value do we create for whom, right? And then how do we reach them? That's the three I would start with. All right. What is our unique value proposition? I have some examples of some value propositions in this document that if you get a copy of it, you can duplicate it and just work through the little spreadsheet there or the little question and answer sheet. Who do you create that value for? And then how do you reach them? Okay. Now, down the road, as you kind of get those three C's kind of nailed down, then we can come in and we can look at some other areas within the model canvas. Like, okay, is this the only revenue stream? Are there others? And how do I take it a step further? A lot of my clients want me to flow chart out their process because they have all these complicated process, but nobody's ever thought about, hey, if I make a donation, do I send a text message? Or, when do I send a text message? What happens after that? Do I send an email? Do I send, what do I do? So there's all these little pieces of stuff that everybody knows is out there, but no one's really brought it together and made it clear in one simple flow chart. So I find this helpful for me. I'm a visual guy just to see how things flow. Okay. So that's one of our key activities. And then everything else is just putting resources together. Like, okay, what are all of our blog posts that are relevant? What partners matter? How do we do that? So some of these other pieces are just kind of build on from that. Okay. Now the goal here again is to just create a very simple framework using the 3 C's we talked about: company, competition, and customer. And then working through the platform of moving that from theory to practice, and then taking that through this document and just building on it over time. This is not a static, one time, one size fits all. Okay. When I first started doing marketing plans and strategy documents with clients, I made the mistake of thinking I could just throw a lot of information at them. Like, here's our webinar schedule. Here's our webinar topics. Here's our webinar playbook. Here's our pay-per-click ads, our Google search ads. Here's our search engine optimization. So we just do all this stuff, and it was helpful to have it all in one place, but frankly, it was just too much. It's like drinking from a fire hose, right? Like the clients were like, I am so confused. There's too much going on. So I simplified it to say, well, let's just get down to the basics. If you can bring into your consciousness and awareness what value you create and for who and why that is different than a competitor, if you can just articulate that, you are light years ahead of folks around you. I don't care if you're a nonprofit, an established company, a startup, it doesn't matter. I've worked with big organizations and small for-profit, nonprofit. And that is enough of a struggle just to finding that. So just focus for now what value you create for whom, and then how do you reach them. And if you document that in a way that people can find it and interact with it, that's helpful. Okay. All right. That's what we're talking. All right. I think I'm at time here at the content piece. I now want to jump into some questions. I saw a few come through. So again, I'm newer to the live format. Usually I move everybody to Zoom. So bear with me here as I kind of learn this thing. But let me jump over here to my LinkedIn to make sure I've got everything coming in on the comments. And I do. Okay, good. So I've got a couple of questions. The first one was around the business model Canvas specifically. I think somebody was asking about that. And I flashed the book. That wasn't really very fair, was it? So the book is called Business Model Generation. And this same company actually is an incredible resource. They actually have what's called value proposition design as well. They've got a couple of these books. They're just small books, kind of and I don't know if you can see my camera here, but they're quite colorful. I like coloring books, which might be why I like them because I'm a simple guy. But they're very defined books. Now, often you'll use a consultant or you'll hire someone that has gone through this training to how to do these things, and they'll coach you through it, right? The first time I did the business model canvas, I had a consultant that we had hired. That's how I was introduced to it. I'm part of a group called Vistage where we meet and or convene where we meet regularly, and we had a guy came in that specialized in this stuff. And when I realized it was something you could go learn and get trained on and get certified in or get to do, that was very helpful. But the book, or you just buy it on Amazon and go through it yourself. It's not rocket science, and it's a pretty laid out, pretty straight out plan. But this particular process, what I found is incredibly helpful if you're looking for big ideas as to why you exist as a company and how you communicate that in what they call their own, model, their own business, their own canvas. So what I've done here is I've taken that big idea, which can sometimes be a bit overwhelming, and I've distilled it down just at the aspects of marketing. What are the key drivers to marketing? I argue in my trainings and in this resource here that there's really only 9, maybe you could stretch it to 10 key drivers of marketing. And if you can segment those and understand those clearly and roll them out one module at a time, you're way better off than trying to create this big plan. Okay. So the business model generation was the book in question. It's by Wiley Press. So you can grab that on Amazon, or if you want to message me, I can point you in the right direction. Okay. So I think that handles the first question. Let me get over here real quick. Sorry. Okay. So yes, we talked about channels. I do have a list of channels. So if you're interested in this, you can again message me or just comment below and I'll send you a resource. I actually built out many years ago before ChatGPT made it so much easier. But I have a resource of every possible channel, the pros and the cons, and even a graph of kind of where I start with a client. I did flowchart that out, being a flowchart guy, as to where I start with a client usually. Like if I have someone come to me with established messaging, they've got clarity on where they're going, they've already got some traction, some what I would call like product market fit. They might say like, where do we go from here to scale up, right? So we're going to look at some of that data. So in that case, we might say, hey, let's go for search engine optimization. Okay, but then AI comes out and just totally knocks that out of the water. I was like, okay, is that still relevant? And yes, it is. There's some ways to do that, but it's a longer play, right? I have organizations I work with that say, hey, we have a Google grant, so we've got 10,000 a month to spend with Google. How do we best use that? We've got a partner we work with that does that really well. So that's more of a, hey, we have this resource available. How do we deploy it? I would argue sometimes that that's maybe not the best approach. Just like, hey, we have this thing, a donor that wants to buy us you know, a school bus. How do we use it? Like that's great, but and that's helpful. But is that the right strategy? Is that the right thing to use? Like, is that the right tool for the job, or is that a big distraction? Right. So the answer is that a big distraction comes back to the clarity as our company, who we serve, what value we create, and for whom. And then where do those folks hang out? How do we best get their people's attention? Right. So that's more of what we mean by channel. Now, in other posts and in other webinars I've said, and I can wrap with this. Marketers like to think in terms of channels. I fall into that trap myself, and so we think of email, or we think of text message, or we think of paid ads, or we think of all these different ways, like TikTok, like social media, right? And we have a tendency to think in terms of silos. All right, and I'm going to argue that consumers these days are not that siloed. We consume information so fast, and we context switch like crazy. Like this is amazing. Like you could be reading something on your phone, in comes a notification for a text message. Now you just have to barely click on it. AI will help you complete the reply, and then you're back to the thing again. The context switching is incredible, right? And maybe you're not as efficient as you think you are, and that's another conversation for another day. But the fact of the matter is, as we move between information streams on our phones so rapidly, it's mind-boggling, right? So as marketers and as messengers, as people with something to say about the thing that we do for whom, and we want to communicate with these folks, if we think too much in terms of silos, we miss an opportunity to create a unified experience of what we belong, of who we benefit and for whom and why. And we really get an opportunity to look more as an integrated across multiple channels. All right. That's why with the companies that I build and the resources that we build, we're looking, okay, we send an email, a voicemail, and a text message all at once. And the messaging is all the same. And we're basically just taking pieces of each one that are relevant for that content, but we're incorporating video where video makes sense, where swipe action, where swipe actions make sense, and click where click makes sense, right? And all we're doing is taking the same message and changing the format slightly so that we can hit people across multiple channels at one time. And we're creating that cohesive, like integrated experience, right? A lot of times, again, as marketers or as leaders, we think in too much in terms of silos. Our teams are siloed, our messaging siloed, and then our approach to taking that message to market is siloed. And so I would argue that we really at some point need to think about how do we integrate that a little bit more seamlessly. All right. So that's an important aspect of that. As you think about channels, I do list out, in fact, I think it's in this resource. So if you get a copy of it, let me just confirm. Oh, I'm clicking on the video. That's not helpful. Okay, good. We do create like different, what we call funnel fillers. So there's some resources in here. You click and read more about that. So I do give you some specific examples of channels. I just want to caution us against too much thinking about, well, now I'm going to do this tactic, and then I'm going to do this tactic, and then I'm going to do this tactic over here. Because if we don't bring it all together as one cohesive plan, which is why the one-page plan helps, kind of brings it all together. If we don't think about how they all fit together, then we would wind up with a bunch of siloed, isolated stuff, right? And that's why it's really hard to get clarity on what's working, what's not. Okay. And then beyond that, the other question someone asked was, let's see here. I think that's it. Okay. Yeah, I think that, well, there was another, oh yeah, I will send it to you, John, the resource you're asking for. I mentioned a link to a resource. I will send that to you. Anybody that comments or that sends me a message, I'll take care of that for you. Okay. All right. So that's the business model canvas from a marketing perspective. Again, if you're on this session, you will get an email or a message here shortly through LinkedIn that will include a link to the Notion file. And again, if you're not familiar with Notion, it's one of my favorite little tools. I've been using it for a long time. I use a lot of tools, but Notion is one of them. And Notion just creates that's not what I want to show, but Notion just kind of creates a notebook where you can share things and then create little web pages, kind of like little wiki pages, and you can share that internally or publicly. Okay. All right. I'm James, the growth executive at james@tge.llc. So you can quite literally in your browser just put https://tge.llc, or if you're feeling like typing, type thegrowthexecutive.com. Stop by there. You can download a free resource. And if you are on this, as I said, you'll get this business model canvas delivered to your inbox. You can, of course, just duplicate that in your own Notion file, kind of build on it. And then if there's specific questions you have, just email me. I'm happy to send you some videos. I've got some trainings pieces for each of that. I'm happy just to give that to you. Okay. All right. Thanks again, everybody, for coming, and have a fantastic day. Bye-bye now.